Alright, let me set the stage for you. Picture this. It's early morning in a sleepy little town where life moves slow, real slow. The kind of place where everyone knows your name, or at least pretends to. The sun is just starting to rise, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink. Inside Brewhaven, the air smells like freshly ground coffee beans, rich, inviting, almost like a hug for your senses. Now Christina, she's the heart of this cafe. She's got that kind of energy that makes people feel seen, you know? Like when she says, "Good morning." Good morning. It doesn't just land, it sticks. Her hands move efficiently behind the counter, pouring coffee, ringing up orders, all while keeping her smile steady. And trust me, folks, that smile? It's genuine. This isn't some act, it's who she is. But here's the thing about mornings like these, they always seem too good to last. There's a stillness in the air, but if you listen closely, there's also this faint hum, like the calm before the storm. And then there's him, sitting quietly by the window, trying to blend in but failing because, well, he's John Cena. You'd think someone like him would stick out like a sore thumb in a place like this, right? But no, he adjusts his cap, lowers his sunglasses, and keeps to himself. He's not here for attention. Just a quiet cup of coffee before whatever chaos his day holds. Little does anyone know, though, fate has other plans. Because sometimes, even the most ordinary mornings can turn extraordinary. What happens next will leave you wondering, how far would you go to stand up for what's right? Stay tuned, because things are about to get real interesting. Now, let's dive back into the story. Just as Christina handed John his black coffee, perfectly brewed, might I add, the quiet rhythm of the cafe shattered like glass. The door swung open so hard it made everyone jump. 3 bikers walked in, their heavy boots thumping against the wooden floor like thunderclouds rolling in. You could feel the air change instantly. Gone was the warmth, replaced by something darker, heavier. The leader? Oh, he was something else. Tall, broad-shouldered, with a scruffy beard that screamed, "I don't care what you think." He wore a leather jacket covered in patches. Some looked faded, others sharp and metallic, catching the sunlight streaming through the windows. But it wasn't just his appearance, it was the way he carried himself. Like he owned the place before even walking in. His eyes scanned the room, landing finally on Christina. "Well, well," he said, his voice dripping with mockery. "What do we have here? A mascot for this place, or did they hire anyone off the street these days?" His buddies laughed loudly, their voices echoing unnaturally in the small space. It was the kind of laugh that made your skin crawl, fake, forced, mean. Christina froze for half a second, her hands hovering over the counter. But then she did something incredible. She straightened up, lifted her chin, and replied, "Good morning. How can I help you today?" "Good morning. How can I help you today?" Her voice didn't waver. Not one bit. If anything, it was clearer, stronger than before. And while most people would have crumbled under that kind of pressure, Christina stood her ground. But here's the thing about bullies. They only get louder when you refuse to bow down. The leader leaned closer, his smirk widening. "Oh, look at you," he sneered. "Trying to act all professional. People like you usually don't last long in places like this." The room seemed to shrink around them. Every customer held their breath, waiting to see what Christina would say or do next. Would she back down? Or would she fight back? And somewhere in the corner, unnoticed by almost everyone, John Cena sat quietly, watching every move. Something told me this wasn't going to end without fireworks. What happens next will leave you wondering, how far should someone go to defend themselves, and who has the courage to step in when lines are crossed? Stay tuned. All right, let's dive deeper into this powder keg of a situation. The leader wasn't done mocking Christina. not by a long shot. After she offered to take his order with that steady voice of hers, "If you'd like to place an order, if you'd like to place an order," his smirk twisted into something uglier. He leaned closer, his breath reeking of stale cigarettes and bad decisions. "You think you're tough, huh?" he growled, his tone dripping with venom. "People like you need to know their place. And your place? It's cleaning up after us and keeping your mouth shut." But here's the thing about Christina, she didn't flinch. Not one bit. Her dark eyes locked onto his, unyielding. She replied firmly, almost too calmly, "I don't want trouble, but I won't tolerate this behavior. I don't want trouble, but I won't tolerate this behavior." For a split second, the room went dead silent. You could hear the faint hum of the coffee machine in the background. The leader blinked, clearly not expecting resistance. Then his face turned red with rage. "Oh, you think you're tough," he spat, reaching out suddenly. Before anyone could react, he grabbed a nearby cup of coffee, the same kind Christina had been serving moments ago, and hurled it straight at her. The steaming liquid hit her chest, soaking her uniform. For a heartbeat, time seemed to stop. Everyone held their breath, waiting for what would happen next. Would Christina break down? Would she lash out? But no. She stood there, trembling slightly from the heat but refusing to look away. Her gaze was like steel, unwavering, defiant. That quiet strength sent a chill through the room, and maybe even through the leader himself, though he tried to hide it. Then came the knife. He pulled it out slowly, letting the light catch its blade, making sure everyone saw it. "You want to talk back?" he sneered, taking a step closer. "Let's see how brave you are when things get real messy." And just like that, the tension reached a boiling point. What happens next will leave you wondering, how far will someone go to protect another person, and who has the courage to step in when the stakes are life or death? Stay tuned. All right, let's keep going because this is where things really start to heat up. Just as the leader raised the knife again, his face twisted with rage, a voice cut through the chaos like a blade slicing through smoke. "That's enough. That's enough." Everyone froze. Even the bikers turned to see who had dared interrupt their intimidation. And there he was, John Cena. Standing tall, his broad shoulders blocking part of the sunlight streaming through the window. He didn't shout, didn't scream, he didn't need to. His tone was low, steady, commanding. It wasn't just what he said, it was how he said it. Like he'd seen this kind of nonsense before and wasn't about to let it happen again. The leader sneered, clearly unimpressed. "And who the hell are you supposed to be?" he spat, pointing the knife in John's direction like it was some kind of challenge. John didn't flinch. Not one bit. Instead, he took a step closer, his eyes locked onto the leader like lasers. "I'm someone who doesn't tolerate bullies," he said calmly, his voice carrying an edge that sent shivers down everyone's spines. "Put the knife down. Leave. Now." For a moment, no one moved. The air felt thick, heavy, almost suffocating. Then the blonde biker laughed, a loud, obnoxious sound meant to mock, but even he looked nervous. "Oh look. We've got ourselves a hero," he jeered, clapping his hands sarcastically. But here's the thing about John Cena, you don't mess with him. Ever. His expression didn't change. No twitch of irritation, no flash of anger. Just calm, unwavering focus. "You have two choices," he said, his voice dropping even lower, almost dangerous. "Walk out that door, or walk out after I make you." The bikers exchanged glances, unsure if this guy was bluffing. But something in John's demeanor told them he wasn't messing around. Still, the leader decided to test him. He lunged forward, the knife aimed straight at John. Big mistake. Before anyone could blink, John sidestepped with practiced ease, grabbing the leader's wrist mid-motion. With a precise twist, he disarmed the man, sending the knife clattering to the floor. The leader yelped in pain, stumbling backward into one of the cafe's wooden tables. The blonde biker cursed loudly, rushing forward to help his leader. But John moved like lightning, blocking the attack and using the man's own momentum to flip him over and onto the floor. The third biker hesitated, glancing between his fallen companions and John, before charging recklessly. John ducked under the wild punch, grabbing the man's arm and twisting it behind his back. With a swift movement, he pushed the biker forward, forcing him to collide with the counter. The cafe erupted into chaos as customers scrambled to get out of the way, some pulling out their phones to record the unbelievable scene unfolding before them. Christina stood frozen behind the counter, her mind racing to process everything she was witnessing. This wasn't just brute strength, it was skill, control, determination. And it was all happening to protect her. What happens next will leave you wondering, can true justice ever truly be served, and will the aftermath bring peace or more trouble? Stay tuned. All right, let's dive deeper into this electrifying moment where courage meets skill, and justice begins to take shape. The leader lunged forward again, his face twisted with rage. "You think you're some kind of hero," he spat, aiming another wild swing toward John. But here's the thing about John Cena, you don't just think he's strong, you know it when you see him move. And move he did. With a fluid motion that seemed almost effortless, John sidestepped the attack. His hand shot out like lightning, grabbing the leader's wrist mid-swing. There was no hesitation, no wasted energy, just precision. With a sharp twist, he disarmed the man, sending the knife clattering across the floor. But John wasn't done yet. Using the leader's own momentum against him, he pushed the man backward, hard. The biker stumbled, crashing into one of the cafe's wooden tables with a loud thud. Cups rattled, and chairs scraped against the floor as the table tipped over, spilling coffee everywhere. The blonde biker cursed loudly, rushing forward to help his leader. "Get him!" he shouted, his voice filled with panic. But John was already moving. He blocked the blonde's reckless punch with ease, grabbing the man's arm and flipping him onto the floor with practiced efficiency. The guy landed with a groan, clutching his side where he'd hit the ground. The third biker hesitated, glancing between his fallen companions and John. For a split second, doubt flickered across his face, but then he clenched his fists and charged. This time, John didn't wait. He ducked under the wild punch, grabbing the man's arm and twisting it behind his back. With a swift push, he sent the biker stumbling forward, slamming him into the counter. The cafe erupted into chaos. Customers scrambled to get out of the way, some pulling out their phones to record the unbelievable scene. Others simply froze, their mouths agape, as they watched John Cena single-handedly subdue three menacing bikers. Christina stood frozen behind the counter, her trembling hands gripping the edge so tightly her knuckles turned white. She couldn't believe what she was seeing. It wasn't just brute strength, it was control, discipline, and an unshakable determination to protect her and everyone else in the cafe. As the leader struggled to pick himself up off the floor, his face red with humiliation and rage, he snarled, "You think this is over? You're dead, you hear me? Dead." John glanced down at him, his expression calm but firm. "This ends here," he said in a low, steady voice. "Walk out that door and don't come back." The sound of approaching police sirens cut through the air, growing louder with every passing second. The leader glared at John, his chest heaving, but he knew the game was up. Without another word, he scrambled to his feet, motioning for his companions to follow him. The bikers stumbled toward the door, their confidence shattered. As they disappeared outside, the leader shot one last venomous look at John before vanishing into the morning light. What happens next will leave you wondering, Can true justice ever truly be served, and will the aftermath bring peace or more trouble? Stay tuned. All right, let's dive into the aftermath of this unforgettable morning, where justice starts to settle in, but the emotional ripples continue to spread. The sound of police sirens grew louder until it filled the air, signaling the arrival of help and closure. Officers poured out of their cruisers, their presence commanding respect as they approached the subdued bikers. Handcuffs clicked into place, one by one, as the men were led toward the patrol cars. The leader glared at Cena as he passed, muttering under his breath, "This isn't over, Cena." But John didn't respond. He simply stood there, his calm demeanor speaking volumes. If anything, his silence only fueled the leader's frustration. As the biker was shoved into the back seat, his face flushed with anger and shame, it was clear that this wasn't how he'd planned his day to go. Meanwhile, Christina stepped outside briefly, needing a moment to breathe after everything that had happened. She watched quietly as the officer secured the scene, her hands trembling slightly despite her best efforts to appear composed. An older officer, a stern-looking man with a neatly trimmed mustache, approached her. "You handled yourself incredibly well," he said, his tone warm but professional. "Not everyone could stay so calm under pressure like that." Christina nodded slowly, her voice soft but steady. "Thank you. I just did what I thought was right." The officer smiled faintly before turning his attention to John, who stood nearby, observing the scene. "Sir, I've got a few questions for you," he said politely but firmly. John nodded, stepping forward without hesitation. Together, they moved outside, where the crisp morning air greeted them. The street was alive again, though the lingering tension remained palpable. The bikers sat silently in the cruisers, their confidence shattered. As the officer pulled out a small notepad and pen, John recounted the event succinctly, leaving no detail out about the bikers' behavior or the threats made toward Christina. His voice was even measured, painting a clear picture of the hostility and danger they had posed. "Well," the officer finally said, closing his notebook, "I'd say you did the right thing stepping in. These guys have been causing trouble around town for weeks now. Glad someone finally put them in their place." John shrugged modestly. "I just did what anyone should have done." Christina was handling herself just fine until they crossed the line. The officer raised an eyebrow, clearly impressed. Not everyone would have had the guts to stand up to them like that, let alone take them down the way you did. You've got some serious skills. John gave a small smile but didn't elaborate. Instead, he glanced back toward the cafe, where Christina was now speaking with another officer. Her posture was more relaxed, and the faintest hint of a smile tugged at her lips as the officer commended her for keeping her composure. Inside the cafe, the atmosphere was beginning to return to normal. Some customers had left, unable to shake the tension from the confrontation, while others stayed eager to show support for Christina. A few approached her, offering words of encouragement and solidarity. One older woman reached across the counter to pat Christina's hand, her voice warm and sincere. "You're stronger than they'll ever be. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." Christina nodded, her eyes glistening slightly as she thanked the woman. She had always prided herself on being able to handle difficult customers, but today had been unlike anything she'd faced before. Yet, as she looked around at the faces of those who supported her, she felt a renewed sense of purpose. She wouldn't let this incident define her, or undermine her strength. What happens next will leave you wondering, can true resilience emerge from adversity, and will Christina find the courage to embrace her newfound empowerment? Stay tuned. All right, let's dive deeper into this pivotal moment where justice starts to settle in, and the emotional ripples continue to spread. The sound of police sirens grew louder until it filled the air, signaling the arrival of help and closure. Officers poured out of their cruisers, their presence commanding respect as they approached the subdued bikers. Handcuffs clicked into place, one by one, as the men were led toward the patrol cars. The leader glared at Cena as he passed, muttering under his breath, "This isn't over, Cena." But John didn't respond. He simply stood there, his calm demeanor speaking volumes. If anything, his silence only fueled the leader's frustration. As the biker was shoved into the back seat, his face flushed with humiliation and rage, it was clear that this wasn't how he'd planned his day to go. Meanwhile, Christina stepped outside briefly, needing a moment to breathe after everything that had happened. She watched quietly as the officer secured the scene, her hands trembling slightly despite her best efforts to appear composed. An older officer, a stern-looking man with a neatly trimmed mustache, approached her. "You handled yourself incredibly well," he said, his tone warm but professional. "Not everyone could stay so calm under pressure like that." Christina nodded slowly, her voice soft but steady. "Thank you. I just did what I thought was right." The officer smiled faintly before turning his attention to John, who stood nearby, observing the scene. "Sir, I've got a few questions for you," he said politely but firmly. John nodded, stepping forward without hesitation. Together, they moved outside, where the crisp morning air greeted them. The street was alive again, though the lingering tension remained palpable. The bikers sat silently in the cruisers, their confidence shattered. As the officer pulled out a small notepad and pen, John recounted the events succinctly, leaving no detail out about the bikers' behavior or the threats made toward Christina. His voice was even measured, painting a clear picture of the hostility and danger they had posed. "Well," the officer finally said, closing his notebook, "I'd say you did the right thing stepping in. These guys have been causing trouble around town for weeks now. Glad someone finally put them in their place." John shrugged modestly. "I just did what anyone should have done." Christina was handling herself just fine until they crossed a line. The officer raised an eyebrow, clearly impressed. Not everyone would have had the guts to stand up to them like that, let alone take them down the way you did. "You've got some serious skills." John gave a small smile but didn't elaborate. Instead, he glanced back toward the cafe, where Christina was now speaking with another officer. Her posture was more relaxed, and the faintest hint of a smile tugged at her lips as the officer commended her for keeping her composure. Inside the cafe, the atmosphere was beginning to return to normal. Some customers had left, unable to shake the tension from the confrontation, while others stayed eager to show support for Christina. A few approached her, offering words of encouragement and solidarity. One older woman reached across the counter to pat Christina's hand, her voice warm and sincere. "You're stronger than they'll ever be. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." Christina nodded, her eyes glistening slightly as she thanked the woman. She had always prided herself on being able to handle difficult customers, but today had been unlike anything she'd faced before. Yet, as she looked around at the faces of those who supported her, she felt a renewed sense of purpose. She wouldn't let this incident define her, or undermine her strength. What happens next will leave you wondering, can true resilience emerge from adversity, and will Christina find the courage to embrace her newfound empowerment? Stay tuned. All right, let's dive deeper into how the community rallied around Christina, and how even heroes like Cena can leave an indelible mark on those they touch. After the police cars drove away, taking the bikers with them, the cafe began to settle back into its rhythm, but it was a different kind of rhythm now. The air buzzed not just with relief but with something more profound, solidarity. Cena had slipped out quietly after ensuring Christina was safe, disappearing into the sunlight before anyone could fully process what he'd done. But moments later, he returned, not through the main door, but through the side entrance near the counter. This time, he wasn't wearing his cap or sunglasses. His identity was unmistakable, and though he tried to remain low-key, whispers rippled through the room. "Is that?" one customer murmured, nudging her friend beside her. "No way," another replied under his breath, eyes wide. Christina noticed him immediately. Despite everything that had happened, seeing him again brought a flicker of warmth to her face, a mixture of gratitude and relief. "Back so soon?" she asked softly, her voice steady despite the whirlwind of emotion swirling inside her. A faint smile played on her lips. John leaned casually against the counter, his tone kind but serious. "I wanted to make sure you were okay." For a moment, Christina hesitated, glancing down at her hands before meeting his gaze directly. "I'm better," she said finally, her voice soft but resolute. "It's been a day. But I'll be fine. Thanks to you." John shook his head slightly. "You were holding your own before I stepped in," he said firmly. "It takes a lot of strength to stand up to people like that. Not everyone can do it." Christina shrugged lightly, though a flicker of pride betrayed her otherwise modest expression. "I've had to deal with people like them my whole life," she admitted. "You get used to it." "But," she paused, her voice dropping slightly, "it still hurts." John nodded, his expression thoughtful. "You shouldn't have to get used to it," he said earnestly. "Nobody should. That's why it's important to stand up to them, to show them they can't get away with it. And today, you did exactly that." Her smile widened, this time carrying genuine confidence. "I guess I did." As if on cue, one of the remaining customers, an older man with salt and pepper hair and a tweed jacket, approached the counter. He tipped his hat respectfully toward John, his voice filled with admiration. "Excuse me, sir," he said, addressing John. "I just wanted to say thank you. What you did today, it meant a lot to all of us." John inclined his head graciously. "I appreciate that," he replied humbly. "But it wasn't just me." She stood her ground first. He gestured toward Christina, who blushed slightly at the unexpected praise. The man smiled warmly at her, tipping his hat once more before returning to his seat. Christina felt a surge of pride swelling within her chest. For so long, she had endured such moments in silence, believing that speaking up would only make things worse. But today had proven otherwise. Standing up for herself wasn't just about protecting her dignity, it was about setting an example, refusing to let others dictate her worth. As the morning wore on, more customers trickled into the cafe. Some were regulars who had heard about the incident and came to show their support. Others were strangers drawn by videos of John's intervention that were already circulating online. Phones lit up with notifications, hashtags like #RealLifeHero trending alongside clips of the dramatic showdown. The cafe buzzed with conversation, laughter, and shared stories of resilience. It was a stark contrast to the tension that had gripped the space just hours earlier. Here, amidst steaming cups of coffee and plates of pastries, a sense of unity emerged, a reminder that even in the face of adversity, people could come together. What happens next will leave you wondering, can acts of courage inspire lasting change, and will Christina embrace her newfound role as a symbol of strength? Stay tuned. All right, let's dive deeper into this introspective moment where courage meets self-discovery, and where words can sometimes carry more weight than actions ever could. After stepping outside for fresh air, Christina leaned back against the cafe's weathered brick wall, letting out a slow breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding all day. The events of the morning replayed in her mind, not just the chaos, but the moments that came after. The way customers had rallied around her. The way John Cena had stepped in without hesitation, not because he needed to, but because it was the right thing to do. She closed her eyes, tilting her head toward the sun. Its warmth felt like a comforting embrace, grounding her after such an emotionally charged day. For once, instead of fear or anger, she felt something else, resolve. A fierce determination to use this experience as a turning point, a reminder of her strength rather than her vulnerability. "You looked like you needed a break," a deep voice said softly, breaking the silence. Christina opened her eyes to see John standing a few feet away, his hands tucked casually into the pockets of his jeans. His presence was calming, reassuring. There was no hint of arrogance or expectation, just genuine concern. "I did," she admitted, offering him a small smile. "But I'm okay now." John nodded, leaning slightly against the opposite wall. "Good. That's what matters." For a moment, they stood in companionable silence, the sounds of the bustling street fading into the background. Then Christina spoke again, her voice softer but filled with sincerity. "Thank you, John, not just for what you did inside there, but for believing in me. That means more than you know." John tilted his head slightly, his expression thoughtful. "You don't need me to believe in you, Christina. You've already proven you can handle yourself. But I'll always back someone who stands up for what's right." His words lingered in the air, simple yet profound. Christina felt them settle deep within her chest, igniting a spark of confidence she hadn't fully realized she possessed. "It's not easy," she confessed after a pause. "Standing up to people like that. Sometimes it feels easier to just let it slide, you know? Like if I ignore it, maybe it'll go away." "But does it?" John asked gently, raising an eyebrow. "No," she replied firmly, shaking her head. "It doesn't. And today proved that. If anything, ignoring it only makes them bolder." John nodded approvingly. "Exactly. Courage isn't about never being afraid. It's about doing what's right even when you are afraid. And today, you showed a lot of courage." Christina smiled, a sense of pride swelling within her. For years, she believed that staying silent would protect her, that avoiding confrontation would keep her safe. But today had shown her otherwise. Standing up for herself wasn't just about protecting her dignity, it was about setting boundaries, refusing to let others dictate her worth. As the conversation drew to a close, John glanced at his watch, realizing he needed to get going. "Take care of yourself, Christina," he said warmly. "And remember, if you ever need help, don't be afraid to ask." "I won't," she promised, watching as he turned and walked away. The golden hour light bathed the street in a warm glow, casting long shadows behind him. As he disappeared into the crowd, Christina couldn't help but feel a renewed sense of hope, a belief that even in the face of adversity, there are people willing to stand together against injustice. What happens next will leave you wondering, can one act of bravery truly change everything? And how far will Christina go to reclaim her voice? Stay tuned. All right, let's dive deeper into this transformative moment where courage meets empowerment, and where one act of bravery can spark a ripple effect that changes lives forever. As the day drew to a close, the cafe buzzed not just with chatter, but with a shared sense of purpose. Videos of John Cena's intervention had gone viral online, sparking conversations about courage, solidarity, and standing up against injustice. Hashtags like #RealLifeHero and #StandTogether trended across social media platforms, drawing attention not only to John's actions but also to Christina's resilience. Inside Brew Haven, customers continued to pour in, some out of curiosity, others to show their support. Regulars greeted Christina warmly, their voices filled with pride. Strangers approached her with kind words, thanking her for being an inspiration. One young woman, barely out of college, shyly handed her a note that read, "Thank you for showing me what strength looks like." Christina felt overwhelmed, but in the best way possible. For so long, she believed that moments like these were meant for other people. People who were louder, braver, more outspoken. But today had proven otherwise. Standing up for herself wasn't just about protecting her dignity, It was about inspiring others to do the same. She glanced down at the tip jar on the counter, now overflowing with bills. It wasn't just money, it was gratitude, respect, and acknowledgement of her courage. She smiled faintly, shaking her head in disbelief. "Can you believe this?" asked Maria, another barista working alongside her. "I honestly can't," Christina replied, her voice soft but steady. "But I'm glad it happened. Maybe something good will come out of all this." Maria nodded, her expression thoughtful. "It already has. You've shown everyone here what it means to stand your ground. That's huge." The comment lingered in Christina's mind as she finished her shift, wiping down counters and restocking shelves. Every movement felt deliberate, purposeful. This wasn't just a job anymore, it was a platform. A place where she could lead by example, encouraging others to find their voices too. Outside, the golden hour sunlight bathed the street in a warm glow, casting long shadows behind passers-by. Christina stepped outside briefly, leaning against the wall and letting the cool breeze wash over her. The day's events replayed in her mind, not with fear or anger, but with resolve. For years, she'd carried the weight of prejudice and discrimination, believing it was something she simply had to endure. But today had taught her differently. Standing up to bullies wasn't just about protecting yourself, it was about refusing to let them define you. About reclaiming your power. And then there was John Cena. His intervention hadn't just saved her, it had reminded her that she wasn't alone. That there were people willing to step in, to fight alongside her when the line was crossed. As the evening settled in, Christina returned inside, ready to close up for the night. She paused before turning off the lights, glancing around the cozy space. The cafe felt different now, lighter, brighter. Like it had been reborn alongside her. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities. But for the first time in a long time, Christina felt prepared to face them head-on. Because today wasn't just about survival, it was about empowerment. And for John Cena, it was another reminder that sometimes, stepping in at the right moment can change lives forever. So tell us, what would you have done?
And that's where our story ends. What did you think of this story? Share your emotions in the comments below. We'd love to know what you remember most. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe for more unforgettable stories. And if you are in the mood for another exciting story, check out our next video. It's waiting for you. Until then, stay curious, get inspired, and keep exploring the stories that make life extraordinary. See you in the next one.